So here's the story. It's called Burning Down the House. Eve walks down the street and she shivers at the cold which creeps around her shoulders and crawls over her ears. Eve wishes the winter were not so harsh. Without a car, it is hard to put up with the frost, and she feels as though she might exhaust herself to faint if she takes another chilled step along the iced-over pave. A light attracts her attention. The light comes from a flame which kindles as its lighter is lit. Eve knows only the wealthy have such elaborate lighters. Usually any common person is most comfortable with the quick wick of a match. Eve hears some light mutters and she grows interested by it. It is a lull of a sound which covers her ears and sings her mind a warm tune which any drunk gets from beer. Eve smiles. She is almost comfortable with the world, and as she looks closer to the men she feels safe. However, her safety is only a trance, a trick, some witchery, which her senses have dove into. As the men's eyes see her figure slumped shoulder to shoulder with heavy grocery bags, they fall quiet. They stare like a human person who has just forgotten to laugh. It makes Eve shriek inside her mind as she continues to walk towards them fearless while shivering to her toes. "Hello," mutters the one to the left as the other one takes out a gun. "Late night?" he asks. "Late," agrees Eve as she moves to step around the duo whose red badges blaze so military on the corners of her eyes. Eve is allowed to pass. She mustn't look as nervous as she feels. And as she steps away, their casual chatter begins once again. Eve turns the corner and sighs her relief as she feels tears rise to her eyes. The world is foggy, only it isn't because the fog has settled. It is because she wishes to cry. After a deep breath, Eve continues to hurry home, and it takes 15 minutes before she is safe. Eve looks to her husband, Peter, who stares at her as she enters the room. She feels her knees tremble. That morning he had hit her because he had feared the news. Eve almost wishes she were in the alley with the other two militants. She might have asked them for a light. "Late?" asks Peter. "It was a frosted walk," tells Eve, as she continues to clutch onto her bags. "What did you buy?" asks Peter as he lights a cigarette with one black-headed match. "Bread, milk, jam, cereal spread," tells Eve, almost forgetting the eggs which lay unbroken on the base of her left bag. "How much?" asks Peter. $12, mutters Eve. "12?" asks Peter as he raises his brow. "You're on a $15 budget," he tells her. "Plus eggs," adds Eve. "So what, $17? asks Peter as he growls. A knock on the door breaks the aggression in Peter's stance, and he pushes Eve aside to open the door. "What?" asks Peter. He gulps as he sees a militant with badge standing in front of him. "Hello, good sir," he stammers after a moment. The militant looks at Peter, then behind where Eve backs to the kitchen with groceries still in hand. "A moment to inspect the premises?" asks the militant. "Reason?" asks Peter, as he flinches over the fact that he had sent a wire that morning to warn overstate directors to cease business with the Western District, who were being overcome with war fever. "A report to the State of Foreign Affairs," tells the militant. "You don't mind me inspecting the apartment?" Peter nods as he remembers hiding the telephone underneath the floorboards. "Sure," mutters Peter, "but mind the nursery, our child is sleeping," he adds. The militant smiles and then he walks around the foyer, glaring at the walls and carpets and by the side of each vase. He is impressed. The vases are of good quality and one is made of well-crafted shell, which he has never seen. "Nice furniture," he mutters before he moves to the next room, and then the next. The militant notices Eve in the kitchen putting the groceries away. He walks past her and then he moves to the nursery whose floorboards he discovers are more than a little creaky. The militant looks at the board, and then he creaks it with his foot a little more. The rug covers the polished wood. However, he knows it is there, hiding. Interesting, he mutters before turning around to see Eve, who has braved to follow to ensure her child is kept safe. What's your name? He asks. Eve, mutters Eve. Edward, tells the militant as he points to his shoulder. Hello, Edward, smiles Eve as her heart thumps with nervousness. Is there any other room you would like to inspect? She asks. I'm getting to it, tells Edward before he turns away. Edward knocks on the wall. Its side seems empty, like a jar whose belly has not been filled. Eve turns as Edward picks up a trinket box to inspect its inside. She hears a snap. It was a very old trinket box which she had wished to keep in prime condition. Now it is a broken trinket box. I'm sick of the decorations, tells Edward. Too many. You need the house more plain, he mutters before he pushes the trinket box away. The baby wakes and makes a sound. Edward glares at the crib and then to Eve, who approaches the crib to put a pacifier in the child's mouth. Edward walks past her and then he laughs before he slams the door closed. The baby screams out her alarm, and Eve rushes to pick her up. I'll be back to inspect the rest. Surely you and your family have had enough of my company, tells Edward, as Peter rushes to see how the inspection is going. I am going to bring a few more men to make the inspection a short visit, he adds. Of course, thank you, tells Peter before he escorts Edward out the door. Peter takes in a deep breath as he closes the front door. He feels highly strung, and attention found is licked by a bead of sweat which feels ice cold. Peter turns and sees Eve with child Gabby inside her arms. Did you bring this man here? He asks. I don't know, not that I know of, tells Eve. Then why? Asks Peter. Why me? Why us? Eve shrugs. Tomorrow he brings more men, gasps Peter, before he walks to a nearby cupboard to take out his telephone. Why? He asks before he connects the phone to make a call. The next day, Eve nibbles on her fingers. Peter has left for work and taken Gabby with him. He is leaving her at his sister's place for the day. Eve agrees that it is a good plan, however she herself feels unsafe. Her fingers tremble, her skin trembles, and she swears her bones tremble. I don't know what I should be doing, gasps Eve as she fights to keep her eyes dry. Then it comes, a knock hot and hard on her front door. Eve straightens her skirt with her hand as she gulps, and then she approaches the door. A length from it, the door rattles, and Eve knows it is going to be broken down if she does not hurry. So Eve races for the door and opens it within a flash. Eve meets Edward and a few other men. Come in, she invites. Edward nods, then he enters the house trailed by the other three men. Joseph, Bruce, and Doug, tells Edward. Eve nods and as they greet with a curt hello. Would any of you like tea? Asks Eve. No, they all say together. Thank you, mutters Edward. Eve nods and she chooses a chair to sit on as the men walk around the apartment. She hears some knocking and a few creaks. Eve runs a few fingers over her hair, and then she straightens her skirt before a loud crack is heard. Eve straightens up and races to find the men who are huddled by the door of the nursery. They have broken the floorboards and are fingering a large wad of money. Your secret safe? Asks Edward. Of course, mutters Eve as she watches the men pocket the diamond bracelets which had rested there by the money. You need to put the money in the bank, tells Edward. Too unsafe here, he mutters before he pockets a few bills before leaving the rest. One of the men cracks the wall Edward had been tapping on the day before, and they cry out before pulling a painting out from behind the wall. Too much a box of mystery, tells Edward before moving to see the painting. Beautiful collectible, he mutters. Eve can only stare as Brutus walks out of the house with two fine paintings they had paid a good amount of money for. Edward smiles as he brushes her shoulder. Eve wants to faint, but she feels almost curious as she feels a warmth heat her cheeks. Joseph startles her by breaking a light with a swing of his arm, and then he takes down the glass chandelier with the help of a throne coaster. Edward laughs, Joseph laughs, and Doug throws a cupboard to the side to discover a safe, which is lodged upon the wall. He demolishes the wall to get to the safe, and then he walks out of the apartment with the safe. "What's the combination to the safe?" asks Joseph. "Never mind," mutters Edward before walking to the next room. Eve trembles as they begin breaking one thing after the next: ornament, vase, candelabra, and books. Eve smells fire, and she rushes to find the bath filled with books and burning. Edward and Joseph laugh, and then they throw perfume bottles onto the fire until it is roaring. The shower is then turned on, and all the fire is doused until it drowns to black ash glued onto the burnt base of the bath. "Too much of everything," tells Edward before he writes a note on his ticket book. "Fine, $800, he mutters. Eve gasps, and then she closes her mouth as Edward glares at her. He writes the ticket, puts it in an envelope, and then he slips it into Eve's front pocket. "Give that to your husband," he tells. "Have the issue sorted promptly," he adds before he bows and leaves. Eve shivers as she glares at the damage of the apartment. She has to wipe her eyes more than once, and then she closes the lock and locks the front door the militants have left open. Eve doesn't like the militants. After that day, all the things which mattered most Peter rushes to throw away, and the articles are scattered on the pavement after being discovered. They aren't even stolen, just thrown around and left to sit. Eve grows embarrassed at the mess, and she hurries to run away from the apartment. Eyes follow her, stalking eyes at every block as militants hang around each corner with cigarettes inside their gloved fingers. "One candy bar," gasps Eve to the storekeeper. "No good." She is given the candy, and with it in her purse, Eve walks out of the store with her purchase inside of her bag. Eve ignores the interested stare of a nearby militant who has stalked her to the store. She walks past and hurries to rush her steps back to the apartment. She no longer feels safe outside, and she would rather sit in the presence of a broken-down apartment than to wander around outside alone. Eve is stalked as she moves past door into an alley which is only weakly lit by the burning sun whose rays cannot touch the cobblestone. Eve doesn't feel safe, and her spine tingles as shadows crawl. Eve tries to rush a little more, however, a shout tells her to stop, and so she does. "Who are you?" asks the militant. Eve tells Eve. "You?" "Frederick," tells the militant as he glares at her purse. "Cigarette?" he asks, not even moving to take out a cigarette from his breast pocket. "No, thank you, I don't smoke myself," tells Eve. Frederick nods, and then he snatches her purse. He finds the candy and laughs at it. "It's a good length," he mutters, before he drops it onto the ground with her purse. "You don't mind, do you?" he asks as he steps forward. Eve raises her brows as she glares at Frederick as he crushes her purse under his boot. "I," stammers Eve before she sucks in her breath. Frederick catches her face and moves it to the side to look at her. "Nice," he mutters before he kisses her cheek. Eve feels ice cold as she feels his warm lips glide over her skin. She wishes she could attract him in a more sensual manner, but she just rests her head as he slides his lips over her face. It isn't as romantic as in her dreams when she meets a person of great interest and they sweep her off her feet. But it is kindling. Her skin warms and she feels her breath heighten. "I should go," she mutters. "No," tells Frederick before he kisses her again. It takes many minutes for him to stop kissing her. And when he does, Eve has a bite stamped on the side of her neck. I want to meet you again, he tells her. Do you know the Cherry Bar, he asks. Yes, tells Eve. Meet me there late tonight, he mutters. We can have a drink. Late, asks Eve. 12:30, tells Frederick. Come alone, he adds before he leaves. Eve catches her breath, and then she slowly picks up her purse. She is trembling, and she needs to take a moment to steady herself on her feet. Eve slowly walks at every step. There is questions she does not know the answer to. Could she visit a bar at 12:30 in the morning? Eve thinks about it. She is usually in bed by 10, and from there it's a night of blank dreams. She doesn't even know what her husband does when she is sleeping. She only knows the world is safe. Eve continues to walk, not sure if she will be able to tell her husband that she has been asked to meet with a fellow named Frederick. Peter glares at Eve as she sits at dinner in front of him. She has decided to button her blouse to the top, and that annoys him. A question about your formality, he tells her as he picks up knife and fork. It is a bit chill, tells Eve. Peter nods. I am going out tonight, tells Peter. I have to meet with friends and discuss the issues that have arisen here, he adds. I'll be alone, tells Eve. Asks Eve as she feels panic seize her. No, gasps Peter as he stumps to inspect Eve. Just a few hours and I'll be back by 2 a.m., he adds. I'll just be down the street. Eve nods. Okay, she mutters before she looks down at her plate. Eve feels ice cold once again, and her food tastes as hard as a rock. Peter talks to calm her nerves, but what she is really asking is, how many minutes will it take to walk to the Cherry Bar? Eve wraps the scarf around her neck and she walks outside. The street is empty, but she feels eyes staring as she rushes for the nearest shadow. She feels like a lone flower amongst the blades of grass. She stands out and she races to walk off the feeling of being alone. At the Cherry Bar, Eve glares at militants crowding the bar. A large majority are drunk and have tempers on their tongues. One woman gets slapped, another is ordered to leave. Eve gulps, and she moves towards the entrance and squeezes through the slight gap in between two drunk men. Eve glares at the company inside. Some are laughing, some are crying, and some are talking. Eve shrinks and moves to the nearest bar stool. A drink, asks the barman. Frederick places an arm around Eve. A beer, he smiles. Eve jumps and blushes as she looks at Frederick. 2 lemon gestures, too, he smiles. They are served the drinks, and Frederick leads Eve to the nearby booth to have a more private conversation. I can't believe you came, tells Frederick as he glares. I thought no, you proved yes. Eve bites her tongue. What would you have had done if I hadn't come? She asks. I would have found you anyway, tells Frederick, before he leans back to have a drink. Eve sips on her beer and then she pushes it away. I'm not used to drinking, she mutters. We'll switch, tells Frederick before he pushes a lemon jester her way. Gulp it, it gives you a hit. Eve nods and gulps it in one swig, as Frederick leans back to guzzle the beer. I like to see you, he smiles. It really lights up the place. Eve blushes and then she moves to grow more comfortable as Frederick begins to tell her about his life. At 2 a.m., everyone at the bar is urged to leave. Frederick stays an extra half hour with some other men, and then he urges Eve to leave with him. He stumbles only a little as he drunkenly leads her to a movie theater to rest their eyes on whatever is playing on reel through the night. I'm tired, tells Eve. as she sits in the corner chair. "It's fine, we're all tired," tells Frederick, as he looks at the crowd for spectators. There are only a few people near the front, and after an hour, even they are exhausted enough to leave. Frederick smiles, and he looks to Eve, who is half slumbering against the wall. He kisses her cheek once again, and then he leans over to cover her figure with his body. "Wake up," he mutters. "We're alone." Eve wakes, and then she cringes as she feels Frederick's hand slip under her skirt. "I can't," she gasps. Frederick kisses her cheek, and then the side of her lips. "No," she orders. Frederick smiles, and he grabs her hair and pulls it enough to make her head lean back. His lips glide over her neck, and Eve lets go of a tear as she feels him move onto her. The wall seems to shake, and the world moves, and Eve hangs her head as a flashlight glides over them and then leaves. Frederick trembles, and then he too sighs. "It's a lovely feeling," he mutters, "only my heart is empty." Eve leaves the cinema alone. Frederick, having had enough, has fallen asleep after an hour's worth of curiosity has been appeased. Eve walks back to her apartment feeling drunk, shaken, undone. It is daybreak as she drags herself back into the apartment. Peter is not there. He has not returned. Eve sighs. She counts her cards of good luck and undresses. She has blood on her underwear. Eve throws the underwear into a nearby bin, and then she moves to have a bath. She can only wash herself in the black basin, and even that is a half effort as her fingers remain unsteady. Eve slips into bed as Peter arrives. She feels nervous in the dim. Peter is drunk, and he burps as he glares at her in bed. "We're in trouble," he tells her before he moves to a nearby couch to sleep. Eve furrows her brow. She doesn't know what Peter is saying, but she feels guilty. She doesn't feel unsafe, not when her thighs are still glowing with warmth. Peter looks at Eve over the breakfast table. "We might have to leave town," he tells her. "Why?" asks Eve. "Militants are trading on us," he mutters. "We must leave a while and come back when it's safe." Eve frowns. "What do you mean leave?" she asks. "Your sister has taken Gabby on a ship. They are already going to live with other relatives. You and me can meet them." Eve shrugs. "Are you sure?" she asks. "Positive," tells Peter. "The world is changing," he gasps. "People everywhere having their prized possessions collected, stolen. Nothing is stable." Eve nods. "I'm meeting to collect the tickets today, and we leave tomorrow," tells Peter. Eve nods. "I feel sad about it," she mutters. "Are you sure we have to?" "Oh yes, we have to," tells Peter before he knocks the top of the table. "Sure as rain." Eve nods once again, and then she excuses herself to go and sob about it in the nursery. Peter leaves as Eve sleeps. She has taken a sedative to calm herself down after following her tears to some case of panic. Eve feels the world close as she nestles into a deep sleep. When she wakes, it is dark, and she feels alone as she calls and hears no answer. Eve makes herself some soup and prepares herself a plate to eat. It is past 8, and Peter is still not home. At 10 p.m., Eve puts down her jacket and walks down the street. She passes some militants. Then she moves to huddle with the crowd who watch some drunks preach the words of horror. A cab orders the drunks to break their noise and chatter, and when one disobeys, they are arrested. Eve walks further down the street towards the cherry bar. She slips inside, however she does not find Frederick either. "The world seems so empty tonight," she tells Eve as she leaves. "What is wrong?" she asks. "The world is good," comments a militant. "Great," they sing as two women clutch at his sides before urging him away. Eve walks home. At home she finds an empty apartment and she shrugs. "Are we not leaving?" she asks before slipping into bed. Eve wakes. Peter is not home and she feels nervous. She opens the door and sees empty corridors. Eve raises her brows, and then she makes herself breakfast. Eve walks from one side of the city to the other looking for Peter. He is not there. Eve wants to call him his name, but she bumps into Frederick, who smiles at her as she nears. Papers, he asks. Eve shakes her head. I left them at home, she mutters. Frederick shrugs. Fine of $20, he mutters. 200 more if I walk you home and find no papers. Eve gulps. She isn't even sure where they are. Peter keeps them in a hiding place, and so she grows nervous as Frederick takes her arm and escorts her to a car. Eve feels caught in a foolish web as the siren blares, and she hides herself as she is asked her home address. Frederick glares at the broken-down apartment. He is displeased by everything he sees: the nursery, a bedroom, men's clothes, a mutual ownership agreement. You're married? He asks. Yes, but he has not come home for days, tells Eve. We'll have to ask him where he keeps them. Frederick shakes his head and then moves to inspect drawers and cupboards. He finds a place where Peter keeps his telephone, and he inspects the papers underneath it. He finds what he is looking for, and he pockets the evidence. I'm going to have to let you go, he mutters as he stands to leave. Eve shrugs. Are you sure? She asks. Yes, he mutters before he takes a moment. The bar, the cinema, wasn't anything, he adds before he looks at the door. It is unlocked. It is half open. Its gap is a news tunnel waiting for the right person to discover. Frederick ignores it, and then he glares at Eve. I don't have any special feelings for you, he mutters. Not any, he adds before he turns away. I didn't know you were married, he adds. If I knew, I would have. A trail of lies go untold. Let's leave it at that, he mutters before he looks at a person walking through the door. Peter glares at Frederick. Frederick aims a gun, and within a moment Peter has been shot. Eve screams, and Frederick catches her as she moves to run. He pulls her back and he slaps her face hard. Shut up, he yells before he races to see if Peter is dead. A bullet to the heart proves he is, and neighbors opening their doors are shot back with bullets that splinter their wooden doors. Frederick walks over Peter and moves to Eve, who is shivering next to a cupboard. He grabs her neck and gives it a squeeze. Eve chokes, and she slaps his face twice. Frederick gives her a harder squeeze, and then after a moment he lets her neck go. Eve clutches her throat as Frederick slides his gun against her temple. I don't love you, he tells her before he pulls the trigger. The gun offers an empty grunt, and Eve rolls her eyes as she realizes the gun is empty. Frederick smiles, and he slowly takes down the gun. His fingertips are shaking, and his muscles are tight. Good luck, he quips. Eve nods as he takes her hand down. Frederick glares at her, and he drops the gun, and then he slowly rests his head against hers. The silence drills Eve's ears as her heart hammers hard. Tears run down her cheeks as Frederick offers her a kiss. Then he grabs her and drags her to the bedroom. Eve looks at Frederick smoke a cigarette. She feels lost as people discover Peter's body with a shout and drag it away. She is now alone, and when he looks at her, she knows he still wants to shoot her dead. Did he think she was a virgin? Did she look like a girl? He had never asked her age, and now here she was, laying naked next to him as he lounges on the idea of killing her. Smoke, he asks. Eve shakes her head and turns away. She doesn't want to see him. She just wants to be alone as she washes his sweat off her thighs. Frederick leans over her and he blows a cigarette smoke over her right ear. Then he laughs. You can just say no, not ignore me, he mutters as he touches her body. He chooses the bone spot and butts a cigarette out on her skin. Eve cringes, and Frederick smiles before he throws the cigarette away. I need to leave. Make me breakfast, he mutters. Eve wants to throw him out. However, she closes her spite and gets dressed so she can make him his meal. Frederick looks at the eggs and sausage and then he slides the bread across to eat. He ignores the word sluggish meal and only listens to his own pride beat him to eat the meal. Frederick tastes the egg, then the sausage, then he scoffs the bread. He drinks a cup of tea hurriedly before he wipes his mouth and moves to the bathroom to brush his teeth. Eve grows sad as he uses Peter's toothbrush like his own. She sobs once again, then she hurries to her bed to hide herself. Frederick glares at the closed door and he knocks a few times. I won't come back tonight, he tells her. Best be dressed to go out. I'll come back tonight. Be dressed to go out, he orders before he leaves. Get out, gasps Eve as tears fall down her face. Get out, she screams as curious neighbors weakly knock on the front door of their apartment. Eve eats the leftover sausage and goes for a stroll. People stare at her, but they cannot see her broken heart. She looks like a young girl and they ask her name. Eve replies, however, her heart is not warm. At the store, Eve is asked if she is feeling well. She replies that she is well, and then she pays for her goods and leaves. On the walk home, Eve meets the strangers who had wanted to know her name. They pull her aside and ask her for a kiss, and she kisses them. Eve stews on her thoughts as she sits, writing a page of thoughts which chatter over her feelings of being alone and wanting to kill herself. She slips it into an envelope and then she pushes it to the side. It is night and Eve turns around and sees Frederick, ready to take her out. The walk is a nice stroll, however, stairs glare at her. They can see what she has done, and she feels a rush of guilt covering her. Eve tries to slip into Frederick's shadow. However, at the cherry bar, everyone can see her. Eve drinks a full glass of beer, and then feeling weak, she lets Frederick take her home. What are you doing with her? Asks a militant named Alex as he stops Frederick. Taking her home, tells Frederick. She kissed me today. Perhaps we should both take her home, he mutters. Frederick feels his heartbeat tilt slow. And then he shakes his head. I'm not asking, tells Alex as he takes out a gun. Sure, come with us, tells Frederick with a tight smile. At the apartment, Eve stumbles into bed with a sore head. Alex glares at Frederick as he takes off his shirt. Would you like to watch? He asks. Sure, mutters Frederick with a smile, and tries to get her to kiss him. She resists for some seconds before coming down after one sharp slap. Frederick glares at her like a teacher looking at a student. He wants to protest, but however, as the hinges creak, he can't help but watch. Alex leaves with Eve's underwear inside of his pocket as Frederick beats Eve with his own charge. He feels so upset that he breaks the steel rungs at the head of the bed whilst clutching them far too tightly. He can't stop, he just keeps going until Eve feels weak and broken. Frederick slips off the bed and then he dresses and leaves. Eve doesn't get out of bed. She lays there waiting for a sign of strength. She doesn't care about the food in the kitchen. All she wants is out. Eve presses an evacuation button and falls asleep. She wishes she were dead, but when she wakes she realizes she is alive. Alex looks at her and smiles. A few dollars, he mutters as he leaves the notes by the bed. How did you get in here? Asks Eve. I removed the doll, tells Alex before he laughs. After clearing out the apartment, he adds. Eve hears screams and she looks out of the window to see people being herded onto trucks and vacating. Alex shrugs. You can stay here, he mutters. Then when time is right, we both leave. Eve shakes her head and turns her attention. We catch a boat to move to a new place, he mutters. Eve furrows her brows. You're not talking sense, she wails as she sees Peter in the shadow of Alex's stare. The world isn't stable. We need to leave, tells Alex, or we all die, he adds. Eve nods as a shout breaks the silence. I said just once, not a day more, tells Frederick before he shoots Alex in the back. Alex breathes hard and winces, and then he turns and is shot once again. Eve wipes the blood off her face, and then she tries to rub it off her sheets. Frederick drags Alex's body out and leaves it in the hall for others to take. He then slams the door closed and enters the building. You're active when I am away, tells Frederick. What did you do with him? Nothing, I just woke and he was there, gasps Eve. How can I trust that, tells Frederick before he covers her nakedness with a robe. We will have to leave tonight. A ship comes to the dock and we can move on. Eve rolls her eyes and she faints. A knock on her head echoes, and she falls into a dream of clocks ticking, telling her to leave. However, she can't wake. All she can do is crawl deeper into a dark hole. Frederick wakes Eve later that night. He has her clothes laid on the bed, and he urges her to dress into them as she struggles to wake. Frederick helps her dress, and then he helps do her hair. After a long while, she is escorted outside with a new hat on her head. Afternoon, tells the militant as Frederick escorts Eve into a car. We're going, gasps Frederick as he clutches Eve close. Eve rubs her shoulders as she looks out the window and sees the houses burning. She feels cold, even with the fire reaching the roofs. Frederick smiles and he holds onto Eve as the car rolls past the houses. I'm going to beat you later, he remarks very hard. Eve rubs her head and she stifles a cry. She should be hearing loving words, not harsh ones. Can we talk about where we are going, she asks. Frederick smiles and falls silent. His nerves are shaking and he doesn't believe they are going to reach the docks until they are standing on its planks. Here we go, he mutters before he pulls Eve on board a docked ship. Eve feels her face pale and she allows herself to be taken on board. On the ship they sit down on chairs and watch the burning buildings grow smaller as they are taken across the ocean.